And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, taking a look at Thursday morning's flying weather graphic here. A lot of marginal VFR pushes into the interior of the state here with some IFR up along the east central Arctic coast and VFR over toward Kaktovik Barter Island area into Mackenzie Bay. IFR here through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. Big area IFR here over the central and southwestern Bering Sea that covers all the Aleutians right up to about Unalaska Island. From Dutch Harbor there to the Pribilofs, marginal VFR, marginal mostly for the Alaska Peninsula. Good swath of VFR here along the southwest coast, including Nunivak Island, and a narrow band of IFR, Prince William Sound, right on down the southeast coast. And then for the afternoon, that band of IFR burns off, and we're left with marginal VFR across the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, North Gulf Coast, and some marginal VFR for the mountainous terrain of the interior here tomorrow afternoon around south central Alaska, and maybe the Kenai Peninsula, as well as up over the Brooks Range North Slope, eastern Arctic coast. Good VFR here out in the west to Bristol Bay, Kodiak, VFR. Marginal VFR, big improvement out over the Bering Sea there with just some leftover IFR here for Adak and Atka associated with the system just to the south of that area. And then for Friday morning, IFR back on the rebound here across the Aleutians and into the extreme southern Bering Sea. Getting up close to the Pribilof Islands there and then into the Alaska Peninsula with IFR here for the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, through the strait there, and then hugging the Arctic coast with marginal VFR over the North Slope and much of the Brooks Range right into the central interior here with VFR on either side of that zone. Susitna Valley, Northern Cook Inlet, VFR, marginal VFR for the Manuska Valley, Kenai Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, and mostly along the coast of the Panhandle. For the afternoon, we've got VFR for the southeast coast, but lower conditions, looks like some IFR possibly into western Dixon entrance. Otherwise pretty good there. North Gulf Coast, same thing, VFR down to Kodiak Island. Up into the interior, mostly VFR, some lower conditions, possibly marginal for the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, actually from Porcupine, actually the Brooks Range here, right on down in toward the Alaska Range. And then some IFR just grazing the eastern Arctic coast, IFR in the Chukchi Sea that's pushed in along the northwest coast. And big area of IFR here for the northern Bering Sea, another area there with a system covering the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea, Kodiak Island, VFR. And from there going to passes up north in the Brooks Range, Anatuvik and Adigan. Marginal VFR most of the day on Thursday. Same thing for Lake Clark and Merrill. Call it occasionally marginal for those two passes as well as rainy. And for windy, marginal VFR in the forecast at times as well. Isabel, marginal VFR also, and then becoming VFR for Mentasta and back to marginal VFR at times for Tanita. And Portage, lowest conditions will be early on. That'll improve throughout the afternoon, hopefully to VFR. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels, cooler air back up here in the northwest, 2,000 to 4,000 feet up there, down to the Seward Peninsula, 8,000 feet across southern Alaska, and 10,000 feet here over the southeast coast into about Yakutat, and 10,000 to 12,000 feet along the Aleutians. Icing, areas of isolated moderate rime icing here from the central Arctic coast down into the interior. That area of moisture slipping eastward here could get all the way over toward the eastern border and maybe down in toward northern Cook Inlet. And then also for the southern Panhandle, a pretty good chance of some isolated moderate icing, probably rime along the south coast there, say Sitka, Port Alexander, Prince of Wales Island, and more so for Dixon entrance with the heavier icing down over the Queen Charlotte Islands. And the jet stream at 33,000 feet, we've got good westerlies here, 85 to 105 knots right along the Aleutian chain here, Pacific jet, then a Russian jet coming here out of the northwest up to 105 knots, but subsiding back to about 65 knots. as it links up with the Pacific jet to the south. And from there, looking at 9,000 feet, flow coming out of the Russian Far East here, 35 knots. Blows about 30 to 35 knots right down across the Alaska Peninsula here. Maybe some 30-knot winds at 9,000 feet here over the southwest interior, but the central and east side up to the Arctic coast. Pretty light winds at this elevation, right on into the Gulf. 40-knot southeast winds, though, for the southern Panhandle. And at 3,000 feet, Prince of Wales Island from Dixon Entrance, look for some southeast winds at about 35 knots. Otherwise light elsewhere here into the Gulf. Much of the interior into the northern Bering Sea. Could see some 30-knot northwest winds here due to the higher pressure out here to the west. That'll be blowing right across the Alaska Peninsula. And also some gusty winds, Kamishak Bay, but nothing too terribly strong at 3,000 feet, and then 30-knot winds out there to the west with that weak system, staying mostly south of the west central Aleutians. Turbulence-wise, could be a little bit of bumpiness out there for Amchitka, maybe Kiska Islands, but nothing too significant. Also look for some isolated moderate mechanical turbulence here for the Alaska Peninsula, up towards southwest Shelikof Strait and Kodiak Island, as well as Kamishak Bay and the Barrens there through that area. And for the southeast coast as well, isolated moderate, possible there for mainly Prince of Wales Island up toward Port Alexander and down in toward Dixon Entrance.